Hey everybody, welcome to the show, Round the Nation, right here on TYT Nation. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf. Oh man, we got a great show for you guys today, so stick around for the next hour. We've got Paul Ryan in his ridiculous statements on the shooting on Sunday. We got Donald Trump in Japan making a fool out of himself and us. We got more stuff on Mueller, Michael Flynn Jr. Disaster for them, of course. Then we've got GOP politician actually being honest about taxes. Then we've got Bernie Sanders going after the oligarchy and climate change. So guess how many people are with the United States on climate change? You're going to be very, very depressed on that story. So, but before I get into that, of course, I want to thank the patrons, and I want to remind everybody to please give us a like and a share on YouTube or any other social media platform, because that, of course, helps the show get out and get around to everybody, and we want as many people as we can watching the show. So, all right. So now let's thank some patrons. We have new patron Emmanuel Mawaka. Then we have Gary Urbanowski and Elizabeth Shank. So thank you, Elizabeth, Gary, and Emmanuel for supporting independent progressive media. If you want to sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYT Nation. If you also want to help out the show in other ways, there is the YouTube super chat, which also helps out the show. I'm going to open that up, of course, so I can read your super chats if they come through. And then Twitter, of course. Not a lot of people use the Twitter, but nonetheless, I still like to let people know how you can find us on Twitter. That's the handle at TYT Nation, naturally, of course, and using the hashtag TYT Nation. So that's what I normally use, and that's probably why nobody else uses it. Just to be fair. Being 100%. Nobody uses the Twitter. Anyway, well, there's a couple people that do it, and bless their hearts. So, but anyway, let's roll out into the show. Got a lot of show for you guys today. A lot of video clips. So let's get into it. We'll start out with a little bit of fun, and then we'll go into disaster. Start with Trump's Japan trip. Guy's a goofball. Okay. Now, President Donald Trump, one day into his tour of Asia, has already managed to embarrass himself and the rest of us. While talking about how he first became acquainted with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Trump, of course, said this.
So my relationship with Shinzo got off to quite a rocky start because I never ran for office. And here I am, but I never ran. So I wasn't very experienced. And after I had won, everybody was calling me from all over the world. I never knew we had so many countries.
I never knew. Man, I never knew we had so many countries. Who knew geography would be so complicated? Look, how did this man graduate college? I have no idea. How did he graduate high school? You should at least have some sort of grasp on basic geography. I mean, come on, dude. Really? He is right, though. He's not very experienced and not very experienced at anything. But he is wrong. He actually did try to run before. So I think he ran early 2000s. I think on some like reform ticket or something like that. Obviously didn't go anywhere. And look, I'm thinking that this time he didn't even think that he was going to go anywhere. But America was in such a change for, such a mood for change. They couldn't stand the establishment politicians, especially on the Republican side, and that he just basically Donkey Konged his way through 16 other Republican candidates. So, and then of course, The Democrats, in their infinite wisdom, decided to put up the worst candidate that they could in Hillary Clinton. So there we are. That's how we get that's what we got into our current situation. That said, of course, look, you don't have to be experienced in politics in order to do well in government. You actually do have to be sort of good at politics. I understand to run for office, but it's really the policy that matters, especially now more than ever. If you actually go and talk about policy, then you might actually do well. And Donald Trump, to his credit, I guess, in his commercials, they were more policy focused and policy oriented, despite the fact that he knew nothing about policy personally. So his ads were effective. They were more effective than Hillary Clinton's ads, which were overwhelmingly negative and focused more on character attacks. So my point is, though, if you focus on policy, for example, Bernie Sanders focused on policy, well, then more people are going to tune in. More people are going to actually pay more attention because it turns out people care about policy. I know, right? So I'm saying that because you don't have to be experienced in doing politics in order to win, but it does help to be experienced a little bit in politics, but the policy matters the most. Now, policy is something that you can learn. Now, learning is the operative word here. And what has Trump learned? He's learned literally nothing from being in office nearly a year. Apparently, just like in school, he has learned nothing. Look, Donald Trump is the ultimate symbol of white privilege. He has literally failed upwards into the highest job in the land. Now, he doesn't know anything about policy. He knows a little bit about politics, and basically he knows the part of politics where that involves lying to people. So he's a good snake oil salesman. And yet, like I said before, he was able to fail upward all the way into the presidency. And of course, when you have somebody who has no idea what they're doing, you're going to get funny moments like this. Okay. Alrighty. Well, let's move on here. We've got another story related to Japan, although not quite as funny. Now, on Sunday, 26 people were killed in Texas when a lone gunman walked into a church with a semi-automatic rifle and began shooting. Now, as more details, of course, continue to come out about why this happened, and as more calls for gun control continue to fall on deaf ears of Congress, President Trump decided to go on a trip to Asia. Now, in this trip, he decided to say some very interesting things to the Emperor of Japan. Now, according to The Independent, Trump met with Japanese Emperor Akihito and Empress Michiko, hopefully I said that right, before a round of talks with Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Monday. When the emperor brought up Sunday's mass killing at a church in Texas, Mr. Trump had called it both a terrible incident and said that the killings can, quote, happen anywhere. According to, I'm assuming this is a newspaper, Mainichi Shimbun. All right. So basically he's like, hey, man, look, terrible shooting, very sad, tremendous loss of life. And by the way, it can happen anywhere. Literally anywhere. Okay, well, look, that right there, that statement is painfully ironic because Japan literally has no mass shootings. They haven't had a mass shooting in decades. While this year alone in America, this has been the deadliest year of mass shootings on record. I mean, earlier this year we had Las Vegas, New York, Florida. I can't even list all of them. There are too many. So, you know, those are just the ones that I remember. On and on and on. So many mass shootings here in America. Over 30,000 people die a year, right? 30,000 people die a year from gun violence. So compare that with Japan. Okay. Now, Japan, again, President Trump said, guess what? Shootings can happen anywhere. Mass shootings. Yes, but they don't seem to happen very often anywhere else other than in America. I mean, for example, Japan. Gun deaths are measured in single figures annually. And according to gunpolicy.org, they haven't had a single gun death in 2013. Look, when you're, like in Japan, overworking kills more people than gun violence. Spending too much time at the office kills more people. When in America, again, 30,000 people a year. And, gee, I wonder why. Oh, right, it's because they actually practice gun control. Let me give you a taste of what it's like to try to own a gun in Japan. Now, if you want to buy a gun in Japan, apparently you have to attend old A classes. You have to take a written exam. I wonder how many of those self-styled Trump supporters would pass one of those exams or even be legible. I know I'm being mean. You have to take a written exam. You have to pass a shooting range test with a mark of at least 95%. Not only that, but there are mental health tests, there are drug tests, there are criminal background checks. Police even look for links to extremist groups. They check your relatives as well. They check your work colleagues. They ask some questions. Boy, does that sound like extreme vetting. If only we could do extreme vetting for people who want to buy guns and not for people who are refugees. Again, extreme vetting. Again, Japan, no handguns. They ban those. But you are allowed to have shotguns and air rifles. And look, to be honest, a shotgun is perfect for home defense. So, hey man, if you pass all that stuff, you want to defend your home against criminals in Japan. Apparently they don't have a very big crime rate either. Then, hey, you look, you're settled. Okay. Now, the law also restricts the number of gun shops that you can have. In most of Japan's 40 or so prefectures, there could be no more than 3 gun stores. Of course, in America, we have gun store next to a McDonald's, next to a gun store, next to another McDonald's. So you can get your quarter pounder with gun. Okay. Not only that, but you can only buy fresh ammunition cartridges by returning the spent cartridges that you bought on your last visit. So it's very, very strict. Okay. So if you fire off a round, you're expected to bring that round back. Police must also be notified where the gun and ammunition are stored, and they must be stored separately under lock and key. Police will do annual inspections, and after 3 years, your license runs out, which you have to go attend the courses and pass all those tests all over again. Now, that is unbelievably strict. I'm not even sure I'd go that far. But that said, you cannot argue that it hasn't been effective. I know the biggest talking point is, well, if you do gun control, then, well, only the criminals have the guns. Well, you look at Japan, that's actually not the case. In fact, it's incredibly rare for a criminal to have, for criminal gangs to access guns. So not even the criminals have guns. And get this, the cops hardly have guns as well, or at least they rarely use them. They actually must, according to the BBC, attain a black belt in judo or other Japanese martial arts training before qualifying to be a policeman. So, hey, look, that also solves another problem. There's not as many police shootings in Japan as well. And here's what's interesting. So, police actually have a tactic in order to go and basically de-escalate the situation. Get this. Journalist Anthony Berteau told the BBC earlier this year that what most Japanese police do will they'll get huge futons and essentially roll up a person who is being violent or drunk into a little burrito and carry them back to the station to calm them down. They literally burrito people. That sounds lovely. I wouldn't mind being burritoed, especially considering what the alternative here is in America when you run afoul of the police. Look, I don't know, man. Again, some of that sounds a little far-fetched, but look at where we're at in America, too. Maybe they're onto something. Obviously, no country is perfect. We are far from perfect. They are far from perfect. But all the other countries that have strict gun control measures seem to have something in common, And that's the fact that they don't have mass shootings like we do. Kind of makes you think. Okay. Let's go to... Yeah, we should go to Paul Ryan, actually, since we're on the subject. Okay. Now, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan wants you to pray after a mass shooting because, hey, man, it works. It works. Now, on Monday, Speaker Ryan went on Fox News, the show with Laura Ingraham, the Ingraham Angle, and talked about his reaction of the to the shooting in Texas. Now, he called it, of course, devastating. He tweeted out, reports out of Texas are devastating. The people of Sutherland Springs need our prayers right now. Okay. That's your standard Republican politician response. Thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers. Send these thoughts and prayers. Okay. Now, Paul Ryan, of course, took a little bit of heat from that on Twitter because a lot of people thought, hey, man, look, instead of more thoughts and prayers, which is what we've been doing after every mass shooting, and it doesn't seem to be effective, maybe we could do something, or specifically, maybe you could do something, you know, because you're Speaker of the House. Now, of course, after that criticism, he goes on Laura Ingraham's show, and she actually asked him about it, and, well, here's the conversation.
You sent out a tweet calling for the prayers, which many of us did. The reaction in the celebrity world to your call for prayers from Michael McKeon, Will Wheaton, others, basically saying, essentially, this is the Republicans' fault, and they were praying. And maybe it's time to do something other than pray, Speaker Ryan. Blaming the GOP.
It's disappointing. It's sad. And this is what you'll get from the far secular left. People who do not have faith, don't understand faith, I guess I'd have to say. And it is the right thing to do is to pray in moments like this. Because, you know what, prayer works. And I know you believe that, and I believe that. And when you hear the secular left doing this thing, no wonder you've got so much polarization and disunity in this country. When people...
Oh, so prayer works. Really? Okay, well, if prayer is so effective, then how come 2017 has been the deadliest year for mass shootings on record? I mean, look, I'm looking at the news, and I'm not really seeing where prayer is having any sort of impact. But on the issue of, and if you caught the last part, that it really kind of frustrates me when he says stuff like this. When you hear the secular left doing that, no wonder you've got so much polarization. So you understand what he's saying there, right? He's saying that because the so-called secular left, right, is saying, hey, look, thoughts and prayers, super fine, right? But again, since you're in a position of authority, maybe you should actually use your power in the government to actually do something. For example, after Vegas, we wanted to ban bump stocks, right? Or after the other mass shootings, limit magazine sizes, do other kinds of common sense gun control, right? No, thoughts and prayers, right? We are a little mad at that, okay? It's not solving the problem. We actually want you to do something about gun control. And what Paul Ryan is saying in response is, stop dividing the country. Why are you dividing America? But wait a minute. If you look at the polls, certain gun control measures get overwhelming support from the American public, even from NRA members themselves. Huh, kind of weird. Thing is, we actually want solutions, right? And that's why we're calling you out. We want to use facts, logic, and reason to solve a real problem, a problem that'll a lot of these other countries who actually do common sense gun control don't have. We're the only one that seems to have this problem. Again, because we're the only one that actually doesn't do gun control. Thoughts and prayers, they're not cutting it. And besides, here's an aside, right? These people, when they were shot, when they were gunned down by this person, by this monster, they were literally in the church. These people were not secular leftists, Okay, these people were not bringing on the gay apocalypse. Okay, these people are good old Southern Texas Christians in their church, doing what they do, you know, praying, all that stuff, being good Christians, and still this happens to them. And yet, oh, well, thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers. Look, guys, if thoughts and prayers were so powerful, then, you know, powerful enough to stop mass shootings or whatever, then why do we just stop arming cops? We arm them with thoughts and prayers. How about we arm the military with thoughts and prayers? So it doesn't make sense, right? Now, Paul Ryan, though, he says, look, prayer works, right? Well, why doesn't he draft legislation to arm police and the military with thoughts and prayers? That's it. That's all you ever need. Why would you ever need guns if you have thoughts and prayers? Because he doesn't believe it, okay? Look, Paul Ryan cashes checks from the gun lobby. He says thoughts and prayers because it's a distraction. He says mental illness because it's a distraction. Because he actually doesn't want to do something about the real problems. And look, these politicians, they take money from the gun industry to do lots and lots of nothing. And that's the point. That's what they're paid for, right? And then when there's mass shootings, they'll continue to say, well, there's nothing we can do. Maybe you should arm yourself more, which, of course, creates this weird kind of perverse cycle. More shootings equals more gun sales, and more guns equals more shootings. That's what's happening. Now, he's right about one thing. I don't understand faith at all. I happen to think that when you do something over and over again and doesn't work, then maybe you should try something different. So if thoughts and prayers doesn't work in solving mass shootings, then maybe we should actually do something. If increasing access to guns doesn't have the required or doesn't have the effect that we actually want it to in reducing mass shootings, then maybe we should do something different. This is logic. It makes sense, okay? And I also happen to think that if there were a sky god that professes to be benevolent and all-powerful, then maybe we wouldn't have these tragedies. So either God is either not powerful, which would not make him a god, or not benevolent. You can't really have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too, okay? And look, the overall point is, and this entire thing with Paul Ryan, is that while thoughts and prayers might make you personally feel better, in reality, that's the only thing you've done is just make yourself feel better. Let's actually solve some real problems. Okay. Okay. Now, it was reported on Sunday that Special Counsel Robert Mueller now has enough evidence to indict former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn in the Russia investigation. Now, that, of course, has many people in the White House very, very worried, as Flynn could be a pathway to getting to Donald Trump himself. As Business Insider reported, revelations on Sunday that Special Counsel Robert Mueller has gathered enough evidence to indict Michael Flynn could bolster the obstruction of justice case that Mueller is reportedly building against President Trump. Now, obstruction of justice, of course, stems from firing James Comey, who was originally heading the investigation into Russia, which has expanded into financial crimes as well as the obstruction of justice. So now Chris Hayes from MSNBC decided to have on former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti to go and talk about this. And this is what he said.
Let's talk about Flynn Jr. and the behavior of Flynn and Flynn Jr. This is Flynn Jr., who, we should just be, it's not just that he's his father's son. He was a partner in their business enterprise. He was his advisor. He was originally going to be brought in to get security clearance as a staffer to his father, National Security Advisor. him this morning, Flynn Jr., the SJW are out in full this morning. The disappointment on your faces when I don't go to jail will be worth all your harassment. I believe that was yesterday. He also retweeted something accusing Robert Mueller of having conspired with Hamas. What do you make of this as behavior from someone currently under investigation? Possible criminal exposure.
It's unbelievable. It's something I really have not seen before in my experience as a federal prosecutor, and not only in my cases, but just observing other cases. Typically, when people are facing a federal indictment, they're crapping their pants, so to speak. They are very concerned. They're sitting there huddling with their lawyers. It is a big deal. It's a scary thing. You know, usually you are not trying to upset the prosecutor. You are usually trying to see if you can convince them not to indict. So this sort of thumbing your nose at the prosecution, you know, it tells me that either these people are extremely foolish or they are angling for a pardon in some...
Or maybe they think they're totally innocent and that the government has nothing on them.
Okay, so Chris Hayes is being incredibly generous there and saying, well, maybe there's nothing going on. I actually do think angling for a pardon is a pretty plausible explanation. Basically saying, no, Donald, I'm with you 100%. Oh, look, hey, Mueller, he's with Hamas. You can go ahead and use that next time you're interviewed about Mueller. Trust me, it'll work just great. Please pardon me. Just saying, it's a definite possibility. But here's the thing, right? Flynn Jr. is a lot like Trump in the fact that he's got a habit of tweeting out and saying ridiculous conspiracy theories. Again, earlier when he retweeted something about Mueller working with Hamas. That's insane. That's insane. So, again, a lot like Trump. So I really do think that he's possibly looking for some sort of, hey, like, help me out, dude. Come on. Like, me and my dad, we kind of need you a little bit. Now, Mariotti, he's going to continue in this next video. Take a look.
You know, that's really hard to believe. I'm sorry. I don't really believe that. I think that, you know, they've got smart lawyers. Michael Flynn seems to me like he's got a very intelligent lawyer. I mean, the father does. I think that they are very soberly explaining this to their client. If not, they're not doing their jobs. You know, Mueller and his team have amassed significant evidence. If this reporting is accurate, in which I presume it is with all the sourcing, you know, they're telling people, either Flynn and his son themselves or these lobbyists that they're trying to potentially get to cooperate, that, you know, they essentially have the goods on Flynn. They're going to be pursuing indictment.
Damn, dude. Yeah, look, hey, man, if there's any reason to start crapping your pants if you're Michael Flynn or Michael Flynn Jr., that would be it. That would be good. So right now, in the investigation, people that are under investigation, also including people that have been indicted, you've got Manafort, Papadopoulos, Gates, and now they might actually have Michael Flynn. They're looking into also Jared Kushner. I've reported on that, and possibly even Don Jr. So that's a pretty big chunk of the Trump campaign that is now actually being investigated and looked into, and it's not even close to being over. I mean, more indictments at some point they're going to drop. Mueller's just getting started, so they should be very, very concerned, very, very worried. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick break here, get myself organized for the rest of the show, and then we'll be back in a couple of minutes. So stay right here. All right, everybody. Back and around the nation here. Jeff Waldorf with you. Make sure to give us a like and a share if you haven't already. Super awesome if you do. Okay. So I'm hearing a couple of people before I get back to the show. At least one person in general said something about saying, "Hey, look, why do you want to take away people's right to pray after a tragedy?" No, I'm not talking at all about that. I'm actually like super fine if that makes you comfort. Like if that gives you comfort, if you're a grieving family and that gives you comfort, literally, God bless, right? What I'm talking about is the politicians that will go to, oh, well, just give you thoughts and prayers and then not actually do anything. That's where I have a problem. You have the power as a U.S. representative in order to actually do something that solves the problem. If you're not solving the problem as someone who has the ability to do something about it, then you're actually perpetuating that problem. That's what I have an issue with. For the people who take solace in prayer, I don't have a problem at all with that. And if that makes you feel better, again, God bless. But I'm going to go after the people who, again, have these positions of power, who can solve problems but choose not to because they would rather get their checks from the NRA. That is the problem. It's the institutional corruption. It is the corruption in our system that is paralyzing our government from actually doing common sense reforms that might actually save people's lives. So, anyway, let's move on. We've got GOP donors. We got the tax cuts. So, let's get into that. Whoops. Okay. A Republican congressman is now being incredibly candid about his support for the giant tax cut bill. Now, this is Representative Chris Collins, and he was talking to a reporter and said that his donors were putting a lot of pressure on him to keep these certain tax breaks in the Republican bill. He said, quote, "My donors are basically saying, get it done or don't ever call me again." Wow. So this is incredibly honest. And actually, look, a little surprising when it comes to Republican donors. And these are the people that are like, hey, man, look, we bankroll you. We want these tax cuts. And you are not delivering on these tax cuts. And if you continue to fail, then we're going to take our money. We're going to put it somewhere else. Incredible honesty. Now, The Hill says, The Hill reports that House GOP leaders are now pushing an aggressive timeline for overhauling the tax code for the first time since 1986. And of course, whenever they rush something like a gigantic complex piece of legislation, it usually works out really well. I mean, look at the repeal and replace bill. Oh, right. We seem to have the ACA still intact. Oops. They hope to pass the bill, which was only unveiled last week, before Thanksgiving so that it can be enacted into law by the end of the year. So rush, rush, rush. Get it out, get it out, get it out. Do it now before we don't have, before we no longer have the ability to actually get it done. And I think one of the things that they're aiming for is let's get it done before the midterms so we can say, hey, look, we actually did something, even though it massively benefited us and our donors. And that's, of course, the biggest problem with this bill. It would obviously help the wealthiest Americans. In fact, the bill would cut the corporate tax rate from 35% to 20%. It's a huge giveaway. And eventually eliminate the estate tax within 6 years. It would also eliminate the alternative minimum tax, which is designed to establish a limit on exemptions. That's something that Donald Trump himself has paid, despite him not paying any other taxes because of his massive losses. Okay, so if it weren't for the alternative minimum tax, in certain years, Donald Trump wouldn't have paid any taxes from what we know of his tax returns. Now, those things, of course, those provisions would all go to help the top earners in the country. For example, the estate tax only impacts about 0.2% of all households in America. So those are people making just over $5 million a year. If you're making $5 million a year, you're actually doing pretty good. I don't think you need a tax cut. Now, that same bill also eliminates deductions for the middle class. For example, the bill eliminates the state and local tax deduction, a tax credit for adoptive parents, and caps the mortgage interest deduction up to loans of $500,000, which is half of the current $1 million. That, of course, would impact people in blue states. For example, you've got New York and California. A lot of middle-class home buyers take advantage of that home interest mortgage deduction. Now, it also eliminates the medical deduction, which, again, hits primarily the middle class. About 9 million households, 6% of tax filers, have claimed the medical expense deduction. Those who benefit tend to be middle and upper middle income people. There's another piece of that legislation which would also hit students. It would tax tuition waivers as income. It would hit graduate students. And that's, again, whom it would impact the most. But, of course, they are not apparently an important special interest group, and they don't give to the Republican Party. Now, Collins told reporters that, quote, every special interest is out in force. I'd say the more they come out, it's an indication that we're doing a darn good job. Really now. A good job for whom? From the way that I see it, look, Republicans are definitely working for their big donors. I mean, that's what they were paid to do. That's what they were bought to do with these campaign contributions. I give you your campaign, and then you go and you get me the tax cuts that I want. But here's the funny thing, right? Republicans are doing very, very badly at trying to pass this tax cut. I mean, they've got one chance to do this, and so far, they're bungling it so bad. And it's funny because they have the House, they have the Senate, they have the presidency, and they only need 50 Senate votes. This should be a layup. They've got 52, I believe, that they can go and vote with. So if they lose 3, they're done with. If they mess this up, it's going to be a disaster for the party because, again, here are the donors saying, look, if you can't get this done, then we're closing our wallets for good. You guys don't deserve our money. Look at how much money we're wasting on your incompetence. And again, they are incompetent. I mean, look, one of the reasons they wanted to get rid of the ACA, as I mentioned earlier, is the taxes in the ACA that actually pay for certain things are progressive, which means they impact the rich even more. The donors were like, I don't like those taxes. I'd like to get rid of those, and I'd like to get somewhere over $700 million in tax cuts. Well, that ACA repeal would have been an appetizer compared to what the tax cuts would amount to in this GOP tax bill. They want the main course now, since they couldn't get the appetizer. So they are lobbying furiously to get it done. Now this bill, to show you how much they want it, it has about $1.4 trillion worth of tax cuts. At least half of it, probably more, end up going to benefit strictly the wealthiest Americans. They've got to do it or the donors are out. So they're going to push and they're going to push and they're going to push. Now, earlier today, I actually read that John McCain decided, hey, you know what? No, I'm not going to be in favor of this tax bill. F off. That's amazing. I wouldn't think that John McCain, again, would stick a finger in Trump's eye. Then again, maybe it makes sense. Maybe that, no, I'm not going to go there. But look, they're going to keep changing this until they get the votes that they want. But look, their timetable is running out. By all accounts, this is not dead. But it's going to keep coming back until they can try to push this through. But the clock is ticking, man. But nonetheless, this admission from Collins is very, very interesting because here's a Republican actually being honest about the donors. It's not about like, oh, no, I'm trying to help the middle class. No, it's my donors want it done, and it's going to benefit the donors. And if I don't actually do what they want and give them these giant tax cuts, then they're going to leave me. Unprecedented honesty. And in Washington, that honesty is rare indeed. Okay. Moving on. Now, on Sunday, a German newspaper decided to share a trove of 13.5 million documents, now referred to as the Paradise Papers. Now, these papers, some of which come from a firm called Appleby, which was created to shelter our customers' money from taxation. Yes, that is their specific purpose. Hey, guys, we know how to shelter your money from your home country's taxes, effectively robbing the government. Go ahead and do business with us, right? It's all legal here. Now, these papers, of course, from this firm and others related to this firm, highlight a lot of schemes that many of the world's ultra-wealthy use to hide their money. Now, Senator Bernie Sanders, in a statement to The Guardian, decided to weigh in on this and said, quote, "The major issue of our time is the rapid movement towards international oligarchy, in which a handful of billionaires own and control a significant part of the global economy. The Paradise Papers show how these billionaires and multinational corporations get richer by hiding their wealth and profits and avoid paying taxes, paying their fair share of taxes." He also told The Guardian that Republicans in Congress were, quote, "responsible for providing even more tax breaks to profitable corporations like Apple and Nike. The same tax breaks," he said, "were being seized upon by the super wealthy members of Trump's cabinet, who, quote, avoid billions in U.S. taxes by shifting American jobs and profits to offshore tax havens. We need to close these loopholes and demand a fair and progressive tax system." So, yes, what we definitely need, and Sanders is correct, we need a tax system that is fair and progressive. What we have is far from it, especially with the Republican tax cut. Now, I'm going to get into some of the details of that tax cut plan and show you kind of how it's adding to the oligarchy, right? It's called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is funny because tax cuts do not create jobs on their own. And it's likely to give an incredible amount of tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans. The Tax Policy Center, which is currently revising its numbers after an error, and will come out with something later on today, actually, found originally in its estimate that a majority of the benefit of the tax plan will go to the rich, while some in the middle class might see a tax hike. Now, I said that they had to go and revise their numbers. Apparently, they had not factored in the child tax credit, which is, of course, a credit that goes to the middle class, which means that the original estimate of most of the tax cuts going to the rich should be is fairly accurate. So I don't think we're going to see much change on that, as again, that most of the plan will end up favoring the rich. However, the middle class might save a little bit more money, as opposed to the previous numbers, which suggested that the tax cut, that the middle class would end up getting a tax hike. Now, this is, of course, this is why, according to an NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, the GOP tax plan has about a 25% approval rating. It's because people think, and they look at this and they go, wow, yeah, that looks like it benefits the rich. In fact, according to that poll, 14% of Americans believe they'll get a tax cut, while 25% expect their own taxes to end up going up. Only 19% of Americans see the tax legislation will improve the economy. At the same time, 35% expect that it will substantially increase the budget deficit. Why? It's because they haven't figured out how to pay for it. When you can't keep paying, doing tax cuts for the rich and expect not to be able to pay for it, doesn't make any sense. Oh, no, pro-growth, right? Pro-growth. Oh, the only growing will be the deficit and the bottom lines of the wealthiest Americans and the corporations. Now, there was another poll that was released last week that found that 60% of Americans also believe that this tax plan favors the very rich. So, yeah, tax cuts for the rich. They are part of the inequality problem that Senator Sanders is, of course, pointing out. You've got these loopholes, you've got the offshoring of money, and all that stuff. And, of course, that adds to the massive levels of wealth inequality, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And see, these corporations, it's not enough for them. They don't want to pay their fair share. You end up paying for them. They get richer, you get poorer, and then they laugh all the way to the bank, which happens to be in the Cayman Islands. That's how oligarchy works. They use our money to rig the rules in their favor in order to make more money. How much is enough? How much is enough? You end up paying more. Now, the Joint Committee on Taxation also did its own report that shows that the GOP tax plan would end up including $1 in cuts for working Americans for every $4 in cuts for the corporations and the wealthy heirs. And by 2027, people in the middle class, some of them at least, will end up paying more in taxes than they do now. So it's an effective tax hike. While the wealthy, of course, continue to benefit from massive cuts. Make no mistake, this is oligarchy at work. Bernie Sanders is right. It's not just in America. Neoliberalism has taken inequality all over the world, but it happens to be pretty bad here in the States. So, what do we do? I mean, that's the problem, right? Well, for one, if we wanted to actually do anything, we've got to get money out of politics. I mean, look, you want to try and get tax increases on the wealthy through this Congress? No, it's not going to happen. It's doomed to fail, right? Especially under the system where wealthy donors give campaign contributions to politicians, and those politicians end up being indebted to those donors. So that's the first thing. And there are a lot of different plans to try and get the money out of politics. There's plans to go through and do an Article 5 convention in order to change the Constitution. And that's one of the ways that I personally support, but I suppose there are other ways to do that as well. Now, if those ways are successful, no matter which one you use, well then you get the money out of politics, you can start running progressives who will actually make the tax code fair again, with tax cuts for the middle class and tax increases on the super, super wealthy. Now, unfortunately, until we can do that, we're going to continue to live in this new gilded age where the elite, where the oligarchy has unchecked political and economic power. It's not going to get better until we change the system. Okay. One more here. The United States is now the only country in the world that is not committed to fighting climate change. Now, recently it was reported that the war-torn country of Syria just became a new signatory of the Paris Climate Agreement, which is an international effort to avoid the worst impacts and effects of climate change. Now, according to the Independent, a war-torn Middle East nation made the announcement in Bonn, Germany, at the COP23 UN Climate Summit. Syria is now facing the 6th year of a brutal civil war, which started with rebel groups fighting against the government. Now, the Paris Accord, which they signed, was originally signed by nearly 200 countries back in December 2015. That was during the reign of President Obama. Now, it was signed, of course, in an effort to curb greenhouse gas emissions and limit global warming within 2 degrees Celsius. Now, that is actually not a huge goal. And when we did the Paris Agreement, I was critical of it because it didn't go far enough. Now, 2 degrees is the minimum we can do to try to impact or try to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, which is already slated to be pretty bad. We are now living in climate change. This isn't something that is still far off in the future. We are now already experiencing the effects of human-caused climate change. Now, interestingly enough, there was another nation besides Syria that didn't sign on to this, and that was Nicaragua. Now, interestingly enough, Nicaragua was a holdout nation because of what I had just talked about, the fact that it didn't go far enough. The Independent explains, it's because the Central American country felt the agreement did not go far enough in putting limits on emissions and helping poorer countries adapt to an already changed planet with solid financial commitments by wealthier nations. So here's the logic of that. Now, I know some people are like, that's not fair. Why we got to pay for climate change? Why we got to pay to help these other countries? Well, because we industrialized first, right? America, Europe, we industrialized before some of these other developing nations. We industrialized using fossil fuels. We didn't know any better. We thought, oh, no, burning coal, not a problem, right? Burning oil, not a problem. It's not going to add to climate change. What's climate change? I've never heard of this situation before. I've never heard of this thing. So we're going to build our civilization on the backs of fossil fuels. Then 70s and 80s, we're like, hey, wait a minute. Turns out there's this thing, climate change. We're warming dramatically. So this is going to be a problem in the future. So these other countries, they're like, well, wait a minute. Now we know about climate change. Now it's a problem. We want to industrialize, but we can't do this using fossil fuels because we're going to fuck up the planet. Well, you countries who actually were able to industrialize before us and who have gotten very wealthy and very powerful because of it, based on your fossil fuel economy, well, we need some help industrializing because we can't do the same thing as you did. I think it's only fair that we help out these other countries because, again, we use fossil fuels to industrialize and they're unable to. But anyway, now scientists had confirmed the emissions level agreed upon by top polluters like the US, EU, China, and India were not low enough to keep sea levels from rising and global warming under 2 degrees Celsius, let alone the recommended and more ambitious goal of 1.5 degrees by 2100. However, Nicaragua agreed, Syria agreed, that it was, quote, superior to having no global climate change agreement at all. So, and look, Nicaragua, by the way, they're actually doing really well when it comes to renewable energy. In fact, more than half of the nation's energy now comes from geothermal, wind, solar, and wave energy. And they plan on increasing their share of renewable energy to 90% by 2020. That's 90%. That's nearly 100. All of their energy needs met through renewable clean energies in 3 years. That is incredibly ambitious. And if they can reach an ambitious goal, why the hell can't we? Well, I know why. It's because we don't want to as a nation. And I show that, and I say that because we have shown that by electing not only a political party that doesn't believe in climate change, but also a climate denier to the presidency. This is a guy who called global warming a hoax created by the Chinese in order to hurt coal jobs. In fact, one of his main reasons for walking out of the Paris Agreement was to say that, our workers, coal workers, American workers, big disadvantage. They're getting hurt. But that's actually not true. According to the Washington Post, the coal industry had employed 76,572 people in the industry. That's actually down. And they continue to shed jobs and, not need as many people because, look, not a lot of people are buying coal anymore. Coal's actually far more expensive. Wind energy and solar energy are actually becoming far, far cheaper than coal. And these utility companies are going, well, why would we buy more expensive coal for our energy when we could go and get solar energy for cheaper? That doesn't make sense. So, in fact, there's been a huge explosion in solar energy now that it has been cheaper thanks to refinements in manufacturing as well as the technology getting better. In fact, this last year, employees in the solar industry hit over 250,000 in America. And now the solar industry is one of the top employers in the country and one of the fastest growing industries in the country. Coal is not coming back, it's dying. Because again, as I pointed out, it's more expensive. And it's also, by the way, the reason that we're not getting more coal jobs back, even though President Trump is saying, oh, we got to put more money into coal, more money into coal. Well, the process of coal mining is actually now largely automated. We don't need as many coal miners as there was before. Mountaintop removal, that's also cuts down in the number of employees and people needed to work in the coal mines. So, again, that number is going to continue to shrink. We've got to bring in new opportunities for people in coal country. Because like it or not, coal is dying. It's a dead industry. And no one's going to be able to prop it up in the face of renewable energy that continues to get cheaper and more efficient. But look, we know why Trump really left the Paris Agreement. It's because he wanted to undo everything President Obama had done. Obama, what did he do? Oh, did he go in the Paris Climate Agreement? Okay, we're gone. We're done. It's petty, right? And also, it's the same reason that he rolled back the Clean Power Plan. If left in place, the Clean Power Plan would have reduced U.S. power plants' carbon emissions by 2030 to a level 32% lower than they were in 2005. So, look, even if you didn't believe in climate change, Clean Power Plan, again, I think there was a lot of people in the industry that were fine with it. I believe even ExxonMobil was like, yeah, Clean Power Plan is fine. It would have reduced pollution and reduced carbon levels. What's wrong with that? If the industry is mostly okay with that, then why walk it back? It's because Obama. He's playing politics with the climate. But again, Trump doesn't care. He doesn't give a shit about the planet. A lot of the climate deniers don't give a shit about the planet. They end up working for some of the donors. And a lot of the donors say we don't care if we're last in the world for our backwards energy policies as long as we continue to make our money. We're the only nation left on Earth that has a majority of the governing political party that are filled with climate deniers, where the president himself is a climate denier, despite all the other countries, and a majority of the world's scientists that happen to be in consensus that this is a major problem. America used to be a leader in the world, and now we've given that up with President Trump. And it's because, of course, we've now proven, and this was true before President Trump, and it's been true for a very long time, but especially now, it's especially noticeable under Republican rule that our country is 100% controlled by corporate interests. And it's for that reason alone that we need to get the money out and to end the corruption so we can actually do something and, for God's sakes, save mankind. Okay. That's all I got for today, guys. Thank you for going around the nation with me. Appreciate it. Make sure to, again, give us a like and a share if you haven't already. Like our clips. We're going to put them up later today on the main channel. If you missed any part of the show, you can always go back and watch our videos at any time for free. The entire show is 100% free. So that's why, of course, we ask for patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation. If you like the show, if you want to support us, please go to our Patreon page and sign up to help the show. So, and I thank you, everybody who does, for supporting independent progressive media. All right. I'm out of here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. And we'll be back with another show, 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. So tune in. Aside from that, thank you. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. See you tomorrow.